everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Grimm Chronicles. I think it's going to be, we must be in the week 32, and this is going to be about week 31. And it's actually Tuesday, so we're getting a little bit earlier. And I'm not really going to say that much, except I'm going to talk about the big book that I finished, which is Anna Karenina, which according to Goodreads I started sometime in May. See, it sounds about right for me. And I'm looking down because Lily's threatening to jump up. She wants me to pay attention to her. And I'm thinking about my other reads. They're all a bit stalled because of Anna Karenina. Well, The Stand, which I'm still kind of planning on switching over to listening to it once my husband finally finishes it, because that'll free me up to read something else, even though it is actually getting kind of exciting. And one thing about The Stand is, and maybe a lot of what other people like to read is supposed to be, I like to read it when I'm like at lunchtime at school. I've been trying to go to school more, and it's like good lunchtime reading, because it really is sort of like you really feel like you're taking a break from working, because you're just immersing yourself in this story that keeps going and going, and exciting things are happening. It really is like a TV show type level of book, which is I'm trying to make that as neutral sounding comment as I can, although I am being snobby about it. I can tell. I mean, it's not literary. It's not Tolstoy, as I said before. My comments regarding Anna Karenina are going to be very off the cuff. There's a lot of stuff on the website that's kind of interesting, including a lecture by a professor of Russian literature at Williams College. And she's kind of does a good job overview, gives you a good overview of the novel and some of the issues going on. And I was sort of listening to it, and it did kind of spark, in conversation with her in my head, a thought. but let's get into it. And I am kind of peering over at these notes that I have on my computer here, just off the cuff notes. Definitely a 5-star read. I'm kind of like in the pantheon of my best reads. I'm trying to kind of place it, and so it may sound like it's not as great as it is. I do think it is great, but I'm sort of also thinking, I personally think I enjoyed Daniel Deronda more by George Eliot. She's just, I don't know, really kind of vibe with her more, even though this is still great. I don't want to take away from Tolstoy. This is probably better than, to me, more moving than Trollope, even though I really like Trollope. And so a book that I would sort of put higher than Tolstoy for me personally are the Germans, Thomas Mann, specifically Dr. Faustus, which is 20th century, which is kind of interesting because I'm really a 19th century person. So, but in a way, I would say I would put this higher than Fontana. Although I really want to read one of the books that you have to read sort of that go along with Anna Karenina. So these novels about adultery and about women in the 19th century are, of course, Madame Bovary, which the Russian professor said was published a little bit earlier, and he's kind of in conversation with that work. And also, what else? Well, Anna Karenina, and then the German one I think is Fontana's Effi Briest, which we should do a buddy read of that. I mean, I don't know. Well, I'll just read it on my own. I'm just thinking how it really moved me when I first read it. This is very moving too, but poor Effie, they kind of sideline her. So one of the sort of overarching themes are being marginalized and how that affects your life, and being pushed out of society due to your own conduct. And I am kind of mainly talking here, Anna, of course, and how she's sidelined. And, I'm already kind of into plot stuff. It's just the typical plight of the woman who commits adultery as opposed to the man. And Tolstoy does this on purpose. He starts off the novel with Oblonsky, this... Okay, so tangent. Another funny but silly video is this sort of off-the-cuff synopsis of it, and this person attaches silly names to all of them, and she calls Oblonsky's character the Horn Dog, and because he's a habitual adulterer, and his poor wife, he's had a lot of kids, and what's funny about the video is she keeps multiplying the number of kids that this poor lady has had, and she calls him, because that's what he calls his wife, or thinks his wife is frumpy. I think I've already talked about this in another video, the beginning. So it opens up with a introducing us to this bon vivant guy who actually is the brother of Anna. Yeah, can't forget that. And he just kind of moves through life. He's very he's somewhat silly, but he enjoys life, and he's sort of attached to his enjoyments in a kind of superficial way too. Like, he doesn't want to give up on the women, and he even has this really obnoxious rationalization of, well, she's ugly, or she's no longer pretty, so who can blame me? And the thing is, so many people think that way. I was just reading something really interesting. It's a tangent too, but sort of this idea that a woman's beauty is sort of an obligation of her to be beautiful, to be pretty, to take care of her looks, and if she lets herself go, this is all just, to me, textbook patriarchy. You know, the idea that if a woman gets ugly, the man is not to be blamed for looking elsewhere, you know. And I mean, so how many really ugly men are kind of still connected to this patriarchal view of women's beauty being, I guess it's part of the whole patriarchal thing of ownership and property and trophies, and like men adorning themselves with beauty too. Anyway, that's the thing with this novel. It takes you everywhere. It takes you, it's life and death, shall we say. It's also death. It's about people who are not happy and who grasp at happiness in ineffectual ways. And I'm actually kind of thinking, like, the lesser characters or the annoying characters, well, one of them is Alexei, her husband, Karenina. And so in the funny video, so we have Frumpy and Horn Dog, and Anna's, I think, just called Sexy Anna, and Vronsky's, oh, Hot Anna, hot, because she's hot. It's all about how hot she is and how hot Vronsky is, because they're the handsome adulterous couple. And the Russian professor's funny. She says when they first have sex, whatever, she always has to tell the undergraduates where it is because they miss it, because it's so hidden, because it's 19th century. And also Tolstoy takes out kind of any kind of eroticism, any kind of sexiness. It's not sexy at all. It's not a romantic scene at all. And because, as the professor says, it's all about moral and ethics. And the scene, I'm sort of referring specifically to the scene where she's sort of prostrating in front of him and saying, you have your life, my life in your hands now. You know, I'm so completely beholden to you because of what we've done. You must, you know, handle me with care or whatever. And she's sort of on her knees in front of him in an asexual way, completely. And see, but what I was getting at, a sort of weird thought I was having, and I don't know, it may be too creepy or weird, is that the fact that it's about these decisions are so monumental, like life and death, like my whole life will change if we do this. There is a kind of charge to that. I'm not sure if it's an erotic charge, but you know, I mean, adultery in general, that's part of the, you know, the forbidden fruits are more enticing or more exciting. I'm not sure if it goes completely in that direction, but I do think that because it becomes such a sort of, you know, rolling of the dice, or that Latin term for, you know, Caesar, you know, the word, the dice have been rolled, adds something. It's in a certain sense, it's sort of like jumping off a cliff, you know, and in your life, and so they do, and of course it doesn't fulfill them, and you know, and it is a little bit that you see this. I mean, partly because you kind of know what's going to happen, and we know the plot, but the inevitability of their being unhappy, and I guess some people would say, well, it's because of what they did. They've chosen their fate, but to me, it's almost like, well, I mean, is it a question of their characters? I mean, a lot of stuff online, which, I mean, it's sort of like, yeah, so say that Anna is suffering from a mental illness and that she's, which one was it? Borderline, that she's borderline. And if you look at the clinical descriptions of borderline, it does fit her mood swings, her paranoia, her staking everything on him and Anne, and it is, and so for me, another thing that I sort of found a quote I was thinking about with Anna is that she's of the main characters, she does remain the most hidden to me in a certain sense. So she's beautiful, but like we get so much of the other main character, Levine. So there's Anna Vronsky and Anna's husband and their kids, who are not that important, but in terms of them, they're important. And then you have Levine, who's not related. He's friends with her brother, Oblonsky, and his family, the brothers, two brothers, one of them dies. And then his beloved, and her name is Kitty, and her sister is the frumpy. Sorry, it's a little bit complicated. The Shablodskys or whatever they're called. There's three sisters. It's Dolly, Kitty, and another one who doesn't play as big a role, I don't think. Dolly's another main character, so the wife of Horn Dog. Stefan Oblonsky. Anyway, so coming back to, where was I with this? Yeah, Levine. So on the one hand, so Anna, a little bit like Bovary, as I recall, like she's sort of, there's a great quote in the introduction. I just started reading it. I hadn't really made it very far into the introduction. It was written by someone, who's written the introduction? I don't know. Has a great quote by Yeats, of all people, in the beginning. Something about Anna being, it's a quote from another person, quoting someone else about saying she's, if I find it, I might pause it and come back to you on that. Anyway, so one thing that's perhaps a little bit off-putting, I'm not quite sure. Tolstoy does get very religious in his life. I know that for a fact. I mean, I need to read up more on it. And sort of morally, so I guess he was considered a Christian anarchist, which is strange. But he becomes obsessed with questions of truth and God and belief and all of that. And many people say that Levine in this book is him, basically. What he spouts is what Tolstoy thinks, which is sort of interesting because I really liked Levine. I really liked him, even though he had an annoying side too, because he sort of, but I so identify with this goody. I've been accused of being goody, well, I don't think I am, but the search for truth of being, just sort of thinking about what it means to be good, as opposed to just sort of, more moralistic in a kind of the way that Anna's husband is. I mean, he's a good person. He would never cheat on her. But he's kind of not very likable, and we can sort of see why she falls for hot dude. Because another thing is that Tolstoy's quite clear on this. He's not hot. He's older and he's not hot. He's just, what does she call him? Oh, the guy from Flanders, stupid Flanders, I think he's called. I think that's what he's called. Like, he's annoying. He's sort of pedantic, and not to be. He reminds me of a certain type of German man. Just kind of like rule-bound and self-important and puffed up and just, annoying and boring and just, So that's the emotions that he evokes. And so we can sort of see why Anna. And so Levine is really interesting though, because I really liked how we're really inside his head a lot of the time. And so one of the big things about the book is interiority versus exteriority. And when we see people's thought process, we see them thinking things over and thinking about what they should do, and also kind of like seeing what they're not seeing. We see their blindnesses, which I think is fascinating. I wrote here interiority versus exteriority. And so for one thing about Anna, so for the whole book, she's not really, we don't see that much of her interior. I mean, we see her struggles with this decision she had to make, and then trying to make the best of it, but not really doing a good job of that, or not being able to do a good job. Vronsky's even more just sort of this good-looking fellow with his horses. I mean, but we do get some of his inside stuff. Tolstoy's quite good with animals, I think. The horse race, I thought, was really, there's these set pieces where the horse race is so exciting, and then later on when they're hunting is so good, and Cordiano noticed, and I really loved it, for a few pages we're in the head of the dog, the consciousness of the dog, and I love how the dog's like, oh, this idiot, he doesn't know why I want, he doesn't really know about duck hunting. I know, and it's probably true, the dog probably knows better, at least what he wants. So there's like this push and pull over what the dog wants and what he knows his master wants, which is Levine. And so, yeah, so not a lot of interior on Anna's part, except at the end, right before the climactic scene, which is the first sort of, it's the big climax of the novel, and then the novel continues with Levine's fate, which is, I just think, it's still, you have to read it, but it's not that exciting as poor Anna and her ending. But the pages leading up to that wonderful but horrifically sad ending, she's kind of, it's like almost showing us her mental illness and her deterioration of her mind, and I call it a myopic view. For a couple of pages you see her looking into people's faces and looking at people and having this really cynical, you know, bout of how disgusting and how unhappy, seeing their fates, and just, I mean, it's really well done though. I'm not doing it justice, of course I'm not, but because I'm not a writer and I'm not Tolstoy, but it's amazing and it's unforgettable. And this is despite knowing what will happen, but I didn't know how exactly. I mean, I knew, you know, spoiler alert, but the how it's done is just one, you know, it's one of the best things of writing I have ever read. It's amazing. And so what else do I have here? Sometimes the purely exterior can become boring. Yeah, that's true. And part of that is that sometimes we see Levine specifically struggle with this societal stuff. So there's a scene where someone's getting politics, so Russian politics, and people just talking, and it's sort of interesting, but the purely exterior can become a little bit boring. I mean, which kind of puts us with the second main character, Levine. He's one of the people for whom their own interior... Oh yeah, this is another key point of the book, and why the ending still kind of works, the post-Anna ending. Levine is one of these people, and I identify with this, for whom their own interior world is always going to be probably I mean, it sounds kind of shocking perhaps to say this, more important and more vital to them than the actual world, the external world. Their feelings about everything, people, ideas, themselves, everything, occupy their minds to a degree that will make them, puts them at a distance. Like it's the plight of the introvert, the severely introverted person from the same world. And at the end you get these scenes where he even says things like in his head, oh, he was so glad that the real world went away so he could start thinking about things and like mull over things in his head. Introverts like Levine and me too, and perhaps other people, spend a lot of time just trying to find time to think. And they need to sort of resolve things in their minds, and that's what I identify with Levine, like coming up with some kind of solution or question, answering a question in a way that no one else can do for you, that you have to do for yourself. And I think it's something that people who are not introverted and extroverts, for example, they really don't get about us introverts, is the fact that we need time to basically just not do anything because we're thinking, or it's some kind of like mental work processing that we need to do and that we need time for. I still to this day, I'm old, often almost every day or a lot of times think, I don't have time. And the good thing about that is having this really, or the sense of how important our own interiority is, even though it's probably an illusion for sure, probably, is that it is sort of sustaining in a way. It's what makes you want to get up, and because you have so much thinking to do, so many things to think about. So it is a kind of warding off of what poor Anna doesn't seem to be able to do. And maybe it's a sign that she doesn't have that, or her interiority is just not as interesting to her. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't really completely resolved all of this. Let me see, what else do I have here? Levin is lucky that his wife, Kitty Shabatsky. So she's sort of a little bit too idealistic, and she's a pure soul. But she's really kind of interesting, and this is what I wrote here. She intuitively accepts this idea that he will be distant because he's Levine, because she's kind of like, oh, he's just Levine. Oh, I just love him, but he is kind of wacky or eccentric, and he's also an unbeliever. And what's interesting about Kitty is she's a believer. She's quite religious. And she intuitively gets that he is in his heart of hearts a good person, and that for her trumps the fact that he is an unbeliever, thereby making her also a good person, I think. And one thing the Russian professor talks about is the little quote at the beginning of the novel before the famous first sentence is from the Bible: "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." And she talks about how it's both Old Testament God, but New Testament Paul, quoting Jesus, saying, vengeance is for me, not for you guys. Like, not you you humans, which of course I like much better. It's sort of, and so to me, Kitty, by just accepting him as a good person and not being judgmental, she's like, well, I'll let Jesus figure out if he's good enough to come, to be, she's withholding judgment there in a kind of Christian way. Yeah. So, gosh, 20-something minutes, just very, very off-the-cuff stuff about Anna Karenina. Unsexy spouse, frumpy woman, fastidious, pedantic husband, Vronsky and Anna, sexual attraction. And I guess, in a sense, it's moralistic in the sense that Tosca is definitely saying that that's not enough to sustain you. You need to have something other than that. For a lot of people, it will be enough. I mean, in a way, it's sort of like, well, the man who commits adultery, it's kind of what keeps him going. I don't know. And yeah, but yeah, Anna, for example, she doesn't like the child she has with Vronsky, the girl, but she loves the little boy that she had with the first husband. I mean, her husband. And so I'm always like, well, that's kind of mean. And I think it's sort of hinting at Anna's volatility and maybe even a kind of sexism there, that she doesn't like the girl, but she likes the boy. It's her first child. There's that maybe issue too. I don't know. But it's never really explaining why she doesn't like the girl. She really has this bond with the first one, at least in her head. Anyway, sorry that this is so all over the place and just kind of fluffy, but that's what you get when I talk about stuff. I think most people who are readers, booktubers, would like it. It's exciting. It's good. It's well written. And there's a little bit of Levin can be a little bit annoying with his obsessive stuff about life, but I liked him. And even though there's a certain aura of an inevitability and there's foreshadowing, the prose is just amazing. And I don't know how these people do these translations. I was reading the Pavea Volokhonsky translation, fairly new, I don't know, I think there might be a newer one by now. It's been translated quite a bit. And I'm amazed that they can do it. Russian is such a hard language. I took one semester of it and I loved it, but it's hard. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it at that. 23 minutes of chatting away about that. I'm going to move on to some other stuff. I'm still kind of dreading cast because I'm just not good with nonfiction. And yeah, hope everyone's doing well. And I will talk to you next week, Tuesday. Hopefully, yeah, probably Tuesday. And yeah, thank you all for watching and hearing me, listening to me talk about Anna Karenina. And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.